because they're dragging them out. You don't get a fucking say in it. You don't get an option.
Wuhan is a very, very beautiful, charming and bustling city in central China. It sits on the banks of Yangtze River. It's a mega city. Wuhan is also home to the second most number of universities in China. People around the world come to Wuhan to study.
It's right in the heart of the country, geographically as well as economically. All these trains and planes are coming through there, and to have the virus outbreak start there, it's almost like if you wanted to pick the worst place for it to break out in, that would be the place you'd release it.
In early December, people in Wuhan begin falling ill with a mystery virus.
First infections in Wuhan started in early December, and I believe the first case in December the 1st. When a new infectious disease appears, it does take a little time to register and become aware that it's new. So there were people presenting with a form of pneumonia.
Local doctors suspect the virus originated in the city's seafood and wildlife market.
So we think the virus probably originated from bats because that's what the genetic data tell us, but often there's an intermediary animal host. In this case, they think pangolins might be implicated, which are a mammal, and that intermediary animal host might have been at the markets. We don't think that it's from eating those things specifically, like through the gastrointestinal tract, but more from handling them, from touching the contaminated meat. So somewhere in that market, we believe there must have been a contaminated animal source that infected the first cluster of humans.
In late December, as the number of cases increases, doctors in Wuhan begin sharing information in a private chat group.
Well before any of us knew about the coronavirus, there were people who tried to sound the alarm. So there were a group of whistleblowers who'd heard that there was this virus cluster, and they started speaking about it. Now, in particular, there was one doctor, Li Wenliang. He posted on a chat group with his former university classmates that people had been coming in with what he thought was the SARS virus.
7 SARS cases were confirmed in the Huanan seafood market. The main mode of transmission of the virus is droplet transmission at close range or contact with respiratory secretions of patients. This can cause a special pneumonia that is evidently contagious and capable of affecting multiple organ systems. It is also called SARS. The patients were isolated in the emergency department of a hospital. Everyone, please be careful. That's scary. SARS is back.
The outbreak revived the spectre of SARS, another type of coronavirus, which killed 774 people in 2002 and 2003.
The reason why they would have been so concerned at the prospect is this was SARS was threefold. First of all, SARS was super infectious. Second, it had a relatively high mortality rate of 10%. And third, a large number of healthcare workers actually died from SARS because of the complexity with stopping transmission. And I think that was the real concern.
On the same day as Dr. Li's warning, the Wuhan Health Commission sends an urgent internal notice to hospitals on the treatment of pneumonia of unknown cause.
Some medical institutions in our city have seen patients steadily with pneumonia of unknown cause. If you find patients with unexplained pneumonia, actively adjust the resources and treat them on the spot.
The notice warns them to keep the outbreak quiet.
Without authorization, no units or individuals shall release treatment-related information to the outside. I have no doubt that local governments have reported the situation to the central government. So local governments were not accountable to the people at that time, but to the central government. They adopted the policy of concealing the truth from the public, but starting to control the epidemic internally. This contradiction prevented them from properly mobilizing to deal with the spread of the epidemic.
Dr. Lee and the other doctors continued to share information.
Be careful. The WeChat group of our class has been banned. The latest news is the coronavirus infection has been confirmed, and virus classification is in progress. Please don't spread the word and ask your family and loved ones to take precautions.
Do not go to the Huanan Seafood Market in the near future.
So when this group of doctors, I think they were university classmates from Wuhan, began sharing the information they had about a strange new virus on this sort of joint WeChat group, they were doing what you'd expect medical professions to do, to try and sort of pool information and see what was actually happening. But of course, that's a kind of dangerous thing to do in China. I think there's little doubt right now that local officials in Wuhan did withhold information. They've admitted as much. The doctors in Wuhan who were talking about it were explicitly told to shut up.
Dr. Lee and his colleagues are hauled in for questioning by Wuhan police.
After investigation and verification by the public security organs, 8 offenders have been summoned and handled according to law. The police will investigate and punish with zero tolerance those illegal acts that fabricate and spread rumors and disrupt social order.
Dr. Lee was disciplined by his own hospital. He was even picked up by the police and taken in and castigated and told not to spread rumours. This is what happens when you are saying things publicly that the Communist Party doesn't like. You're spreading rumours. Even if somebody is trying to tell the world about a potentially dangerous virus, the first instinct is to shut them up.
Despite the risk of retribution, critics like Dr. Wu Cheng, who already lost his university job for defying a ban by President Xi on teaching democracy, continue to speak out over the government's handling of the crisis.
They were basically concealing the truth. Although internal controls were in place, the information kept from the public caused the outbreak of the disaster and the spread of the disease.
That's the key point in this saga. You know, they lost about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, just when the virus was at its sort of nascent point, just at a time where they could have traced it, just at a time where perhaps they could have checked it more substantially. But that was lost because it got caught up in the politics of the information flow and information surveillance in China.
4 weeks after the first infections, China notifies the World Health Organization of the outbreak. Things are about to get worse. In early January, millions of Chinese are preparing to travel to and from Wuhan to celebrate Chinese New Year with their families.
If you were to pick the most dangerous time, the worst time for a virus to break out here, the worst time for it to spread quickly across China and even around the world, it would be the Lunar New Year. You have hundreds of millions of people crisscrossing China, travelling overseas, and because of that mass migration, the largest mass migration annually in the world, I mean, it was just a terrible time for this virus outbreak to happen.
Australian resident Ying Wang, who lives in Melbourne, is preparing to visit Wuhan with her husband and 2 children when she hears about the outbreak.
It was a couple of days after our Christmas holiday in Melbourne. I got a video sent over from my cousin in Wuhan, and according to the video, there was suspected SARS-like pneumonia. And I asked my cousin, should I cancel my trip? We waited until probably the first week in January. And then there was an official announcement from our local government back in Wuhan saying that the disease was controllable. And then it sort of, I feel relieved. So we went out. We went out with our trip.
Ying Wang and her family arrive in Wuhan on January 9. That same day, a 61-year-old man who had visited the seafood market becomes the first person to die of coronavirus. His death is kept quiet for 2 days.
During the most crucial time of the spread of disease in early Jan, Wuhan and Hubei were holding annual political meetings. As a result, the first death, which occurred on January 9, was not announced until January 11. After January 11, the data on deaths and confirmed cases plateaued and the numbers had not changed at all. I believe that the local authorities concealed the truth from the public due to political concerns.
On January 22, the government finally acknowledges the gravity of the situation at a press conference in Beijing.
病毒存在变异的可能，疫情存在着进一步扩大的风险。当前，政治春运、人员流动性激增，客观上加大了疫情传播的风险和防控的难度，绝不能掉以轻心，要高度警惕。
9 people have died and 440 people are confirmed to have contracted a mysterious coronavirus as China works to stop it spreading during the Lunar New Year travel rush.
It was 22nd of January. That was the turning point. It was Wednesday, and just bad news started coming in. It started with the Chinese official news saying that it's getting much worse than they expected. And then all of a sudden, I think it was the next day, 23rd, I remember, I woke up quite late, like 10 a.m. And suddenly, my dad just told me, oh, we can't go out now. We can't go out. We can't get out of our apartment.
There's been a dramatic development this morning in the Chinese city of Wuhan, which is the epicentre of an outbreak of a deadly new virus. All public transport, buses, trains, ferries and the airport have been shut down as authorities scramble to contain the spread of the coronavirus.
I mean, when the authorities decided to lock down that whole province of Hubei, that's like locking down the entire population of Italy and telling them you can't leave that province. It was really the moment when everybody knew, all right, this is a big problem.
When Wuhan went into lockdown, I think January the 23rd, and then flights and greater lockdown measures across China, this is unprecedented in the history of modern medicine. We've never tried, we know that containment can work, but it's never really been done at this large scale.
The day I learned that Wuhan was in lockdown, I felt quite shocked, and I immediately started worrying about food supply, and I had to stop everything on the day, just started messaging everybody to find out, is that really the official news? How serious is this announcement?
By late January, Wuhan's hospitals are struggling to cope. And medical staff are under intolerable pressure. With patient numbers surging, construction begins on 2 new hospitals, with one scheduled to open in just over a week.
Even though Chinese authorities have effectively shut down several cities, the World Health Organization says it's not yet a global health emergency.
So obviously the whole world was watching very closely through January as this epidemic unfolded, and people were very concerned. A lot of experts were concerned and felt that the public health emergency of international concern should have been declared earlier. I think people were harking back to Ebola and what happened there, and they were afraid of delays that might have been very costly in terms of the ability to save people's lives.
Australia's first case of coronavirus has been confirmed in Victoria as New South Wales announces it has 2 probable cases.
So the minute we made the diagnosis of the first case in Australia, we knew how significant that was, and we knew that we wanted to culture the virus.
In a major breakthrough, Australian scientists become the first outside China to isolate the virus in a laboratory.
It's definitely growing. It started at 30, so that's 3 logs, so 1,000 times stronger.
Awesome.
So it's definitely growing.
So we've got it. Fantastic.
Yeah.
CSIRO scientists begin growing the virus in their highest security laboratory, reserved for the most deadly pathogens.
We don't actually know how dangerous this virus is. We know it kills people, but we don't know how many, and we don't know exactly what the mechanism is by which this virus kills people. So at the moment we're taking the highest level of precautions.
Our staff can only usually work about 4 hours in those suits and in those conditions, because it's very stressful to imagine you're actually working with such high volatile agents.
The most important thing that we're doing at the moment is growing the virus to produce more of it so that we can understand more about the characteristics of this virus and also how it behaves in our biological model so that we can see the progress of the disease.
So we will then introduce the virus into our test animals, on this occasion ferrets, because their respiratory system is very similar to humans. And the idea here is to understand how that infection progresses and how it behaves. This is very important for us to understand, because if we can't understand how the infection progresses and in which way it progresses, we can't understand how vaccines work.